Doyarosa Guru Edase Guru
Ahe Vaishnava Thakura Doyarasa Gara Edase Karuna Kori
Diyapada Chaya Sodohe Amaya
Diyapada Chaya Sadaya Maya
Diyapada Chaya Sodohe Amaya Tomara Charana Dhore Tomara Charana Dhore
Chaya Vega Domi Chaya Dosha Shodhi Chaya Guna Deho Dase
Chaya Vega Domi Chaya Dosha Sodhi Chaya Guna Deho Dase Chaya Guna Deho Dase Chaya Satsanga Deho He Amare Chaya Satsanga Deho He Amare Chaya Satsanga Deho He Amare Pushechi Sangero Ashe
Ekakiya Mara Nahi Paya Bala Harinam Sankirtane
Ekakiya Mara Nahi Paya Bala Harinam Sankirtane Harinam Sankirtane Tumi kripa kore Shadabindo Diya Tumi kripa kore Shadabindo Diya Tumi kripa kore Shadabindo Diya Deho Krishna Nama Dane Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna se tomara Krishna dite para tomara sakati ache
Krishna se Tomara Krishna Dite Paro Tomara Shakati Ache Krishna boli,
আমি তো গঙ্গা কৃষ্ণ কৃষ্ণ বলি গাইতাবা পাছে পাছে ওহে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ারা সাগর এদাসে করুণা করি ওহে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ারা সাগর এদাসে করুণা করি বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর ওহে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর ওহে বৈষ্ণব সাগর দয়াসে সাগর বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ারা সাগর ওহে বৈষ্ণব ঠাকুর দয়ারা সাগর এদাসে করুণা করি এদাসে
Hare Krishna, welcome everyone. Please accept my obeisances. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी दंडवत प्रणाम जय श्री प्रभुपाद
Hare Krishna.
हरे कृष्ण
Hare Krishna
प्रभु जी
Prabhuji
दंडवत
Dandavad
प्रणाम।
Hare
Pranam.
Krishna
Krishna
Prabhuji
Prabhuji,
Dandavad
Dandavad
Krishna
Pranam.
Prabhuji.
Prabhuji.
All glories
Hare
to Srila
Krishna.
Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Thank you everyone for joining at such an early hour in the morning. And we'll start with our prayers to the spiritual master. And then today we will start with chapter 1. So last time we completed the introduction and I shared the homework starting chapter 1. There's no homework for the introduction in the group, also with a study guide. And in case you missed it last week and you're joining, we also shared the recording of last week's class. So today we're beginning with chapter 1, and we'll start with the prayers to the spiritual master. Om Gyanam Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitangsha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so this is Bhagavad Gita, chapter 1, Something happened with this font here. Okay. And I want to give credit to Her Grace Mother Urmila. A lot of these slides that I cover, not all of it and not all of them, but a lot of the slides that I cover are from her and her team that work on this. So she also teaches Bhakti Shastri. She used to teach before. She, I think, still teaches. And of course, her courses and materials, everything are amazing. So, so all credit goes to her. So we're beginning chapter 1, as I mentioned. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this is chapter 1 is beginning, or a very important aspect of chapter 1 is Arjuna's doubt, right? His concern about fighting in this battle. And as I had mentioned last time, Arjun is a soft-hearted warrior. He's a warrior, he's a fighter, he's a great devotee of the Lord. And not only is he a king and a warrior, but he's a soft-hearted warrior. And this is why, although he has every justification to fight, even then he has doubt whether or not he should fight. And this is the reason why in the previous class we covered the story of the Mahabharata, because every text has a context. Every speech has a context. Everything has a context. And in order to really appreciate the Bhagavad Gita and appreciate Arjuna's doubts and Krishna's response, who Krishna is, who Arjuna is, we need the context. Because if something is taken out of context, then it can seem wrong or bad. But in a particular context, that same thing can feel the most correct thing to do. Similarly, out of context, something can feel correct, but in a certain context, it can be wrong. So every text has a context, and the Gita's context is the Mahabharata. It's actually in the Mahabharata. And Arjuna's greatness, his compassion, and his soft-heartedness are all the more in focus and brilliant given the context of the Mahabharata, the context of his life, what the Pandavas went through with the Kauravas, how bad Duryodhan was. Yet still, he is having doubt. And he still doesn't want to fight. And this is the quality of a great person. Prabhupada actually writes that they always they're always very self-reflective, and even in the most dire circumstance, they're dhira, they're sober, and they're thinking that it's Duryodhan did 1,000 things wrong, but they're thinking in their heart and mind, should I still fight? Should I show more compassion? And this is the quality of a great person. They err on the side of giving trouble to themselves, of err on the side of compassion rather than on the side of aggression. So his quality of doubt is, as Krishna very candidly points out, it's a sign of illusion, but his quality of wanting to be sure that his actions have spiritual guidance is a good thing. It's illusion, but it's also not illusion, because an advanced devotee and an intelligent person, a dhira, sober person, always wants to take, especially major decisions in life, guidance from the Lord, from the devotees. And at the end of the battle, when Maharaj Yudhishthir is completely distraught because of the horrible, Yes, the Bhagavatam actually writes it that way. The terrifying and horrible consequences of the Kurukshetra battle. He is devastated, and he goes to Bhishmadev for solace. And the solace that Bhishmadev gives him is that whatever you did, you acted on the instructions with the guidance of the Brahmanas, of the scriptures, of the Supreme Lord Himself. So whatever you did was their responsibility, and whatever you did was based on their instruction. So it's not your responsibility. You don't have to, either way, good or bad, you don't have to take, you don't have to feel that you are the cause of this, because you acted simply on their instruction. So going into the battle, maybe it didn't seem so bad, right? It was okay, we're going for a fight. Going into an activity, we don't sometimes realize what the consequence will be. And so this is why Arjuna, a thoughtful person, right? He's taking guidance from everyone before going into that, so that if the consequence is bad, you have the strength to, you have the understanding, the strength, the satisfaction of at least acting, not in haste, but under the guidance, with the inspiration of the Supreme Lord, the devotees, and the scriptures. So they say we act in haste and we lament in leisure. Rather, the better way in anything that we do, especially if we're making big decisions or important decisions, is to act slowly and then not have to lament in leisure. So Arjuna, his quality of doubt is a sign of intelligence. In the Gita's beginning chapter, we are presented with the circumstances that lead Arjuna to an interest in spiritual philosophy. So these are the great warriors. Chapter 1 opens with setting the scene. On both sides, there's great armies. And on one side are the Pandavas, and the other side are the Kurus. And these are the big names that are mentioned in this battlefield. And there's millions of soldiers, but some of the warriors are Maharathis. And these great warriors, depending on their status, they were titled based upon how many soldiers, or you could say warriors, they could fight with at one time. So some of them were, one-on-one combat. There were soldiers strong enough to fight another soldier. Some of them could fight 100 soldiers at one time. Others could fight 1,000, another 10,000, another 100,000. So the description of this wonderful arena is given in the words of Duryodhana, who's looking over this battlefield with great pride. And this is a point we get to, that on one side you see Arjuna's response, the other side you see Duryodhana's response. It's so confident of, his nonsense, right? He's instigating this war. It's his greed for just a kingdom, and he's so confident about it that of course it's right, and all these people should die for me. And the Pandavas, they are they're least disinterested in the war. They're fighting just for dharma, yet so careful, so unconfident about their right for the kingdom. So on the Pandava side was Bhima, Arjuna, Yuyudhana, Virata, Drupada, the son of Drupada, Drishtadyumna, who was also the captain, the chief of the battle on the Pandava side. Yudhamanyu, Uttamoja, the son of Subhadra, which was Abhimanyu, and the sons of Draupadi. And if you get into the details of the Mahabharata, you get to know who these great warriors were, how wonderful, how powerful they were. Drishtadyumna was born to kill Dronacharya, right? Both Draupadi and Drishtadyumna are born from the fire. Imagine what a celestial birth. So he was no ordinary person, and therefore, on the Kaurava side, Bhishma was the commander-in-chief. On the Pandava side, it was Drishtadyumna, who was not as powerful as Bhishma. But why Drishtadyumna? Because he was born from fire. He was also no ordinary person. On the Kuru side, there's Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana, Dronacharya, Bhishma, Karna, Kripa, Ashvathama, Vikarna, the son of Somadatta called Bhurishrava, Jayadratha, Kritavarma, and Shalya. So here, Duryodhana, as I mentioned, begins this chapter in some ways, and I'm skipping a lot. Text 1 of the Bhagavad Gita is very, very important. But anyway, we're starting from here. So Duryodhana makes a speech. He goes to Bhishma and he starts to talk about his army and the other army. And Prabhupada writes in the purports that Duryodhana is a very, very astute politician. Right? He's a very sophisticated politician. So generally, when we think about demons and devotees or demons and demigods, we think about demons with, fangs coming out and, just, very dull-headed kind of. But Duryodhana is a very sophisticated demon, right? And those are oftentimes more dangerous. So, so he is going to Bhishma because he knows that Bhishma is the weakest link in his army. Bhishma is the most powerful link, but Bhishma is also the weakest link. And this is why Bhishma is someone he wants to talk to and feel out before he begins this battle. And the way he speaks with him is very, very interesting. It's very it's not just a kind of a spontaneous, innocent conversation. He's particularly naming people and he's particularly saying things in a certain way to inspire and boost up Bhishma. And the things that he's saying are also predictions for what's going to happen at the end. And text 1 of the Bhagavad Gita, the words that are said, Dhritarashtra Uvacha, right? The words that Dhritarashtra says are also predictions for the final outcome. But in text 9, Duryodhana says, there are many other heroes who are prepared to lay down their lives for my sake. So Prabhupada writes, this is actually, he's predicting their death, that the warriors on his side will all have to lay down their lives for Duryodhana's sake, because they will all die in this battlefield, because they're fighting against Krishna, they're fighting against Dharma. Whereas the side of the Pandavas, most of them die, but they will be triumphant. They all will not die. The Pandavas themselves will not die. Prabhupada writes in a lecture on text 4, Krishna wanted to gather all the demoniac powers on the battlefield of Kurukshetra and kill them. That was his plan. The fight was who would be the king, Maharaj Yudhishthira or Duryodhana. So Krishna decided Duryodhana is unfit, Maharaj Yudhishthira is fit. This was Krishna's desire. Therefore the fight, Kurukshetra. Krishna wanted to wipe out all unwanted demons from the face of the world and enthrone Maharaj Yudhishthira because he was the exact representative of Krishna. Anyone who was killed, who died in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, in the presence of Krishna, they all attained their original constitutional position, spiritual form. Very key point here. Anyone who was killed, who died in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, in the presence of Krishna, they all attained their original constitutional position, their spiritual form. They all went back home, back to Godhead, everyone. Therefore, Krishna is absolute. Either he's killing or he's protecting. It's all the same. So, one of the things that we learn from various texts, and I actually have to look for the source on this, but we learned that 640 million people died in this battlefield in the course of 18 days. So yes, when Krishna arranges a battle, he also does it in grand style. So this was, the world's greatest carnage, the world's greatest battle. And I don't ever like to even mention that number, and that's why I didn't mention it until now when we were talking about the effect of the war, but it's just too much to stomach. However, when you read this passage of Srila Prabhupada, then you can understand the perspective. So all of those people, we have different theories that, well, some went to the heavenly planets, some this, some that, but they're saying that anyone who died in the presence of Krishna, they all attained their spiritual form. It was a liberation. Prabhupada specifies spiritual form, their original constitutional position, spiritual form. Not just that they merged into Brahma Jyoti. They attained their constitutional position. They received liberation. They went back home, back to Godhead. It's very clear. And so this was Krishna's grand liberation program. A very fast track way to take 640 million people back home, back to Godhead. Now, everyone probably didn't die in the presence of Krishna. There were some who missed out, or they weren't qualified or something. But then they went to the heavenly planets, because those who fight in the battle out of duty, and they were fighting out of duty, not out of really choice. It was only Duryodhana's really choice, but the soldiers, those who were in the armies, they would at least gain the heavenly planets. But Krishna was looking over that entire army. So most of them, the majority of them, it seems, went back home, back to Godhead. So Prabhupada here is saying that Yudhishthira Maharaj was a representative of Krishna. He was fit for the kingdom, and Krishna wanted him to be the king. And Krishna, why this great battle needed to happen? Because Krishna used this as a catalyst to destroy all the demons who had overpowered that world at that time. And you see how this material world is a material world that Krishna had to relieve the world of this great burden. Therefore, he had this battle happen. He says this in the Gita, to destroy the miscreants. And then right after his disappearance, about Krishna, soon after the battle of Kurukshetra, he disappears from the vision of people, and ends his pastimes on this planet. Right after that, Kali Yuga comes. The worst age, the age of Kali, comes. So you may think, well, what was the use of this great battle? It's there to establish dharma and all these things. And right after that, adharma manifests again. The age of Kali is there. And yes, it's a fact. Krishna, there's all these demoniac kings. They're too powerful. He had to destroy them and then prepare for the next age. And again, adharma comes. And now again, Lord Chaitanya comes. And we have the holy name, and we're trying to, take as many souls and go ourselves back home, back to Godhead. So all of these, this movement, these pastimes of the Lord, they're opening the door for us, and they're trying to get as many people through the door as they can. And, and there's always devotees on this planet, in this material world, trying to get people out the door. And but the fundamental nature of the material world doesn't change. The fundamental nature of this material world is that it's a place of dukhalayam ashashvatam. It's a place of suffering and many problems. Somebody was criticizing me that, Swamiji, you are introducing this Hare Krishna movement. People are becoming cowardly. They simply chant Hare Krishna. Prabhupada is saying in that lecture. So I replied that you will see the power of the Hare Krishna movement in due course of time. Because there are two battles in India, the battle between Ravana and Ravana, the battle of Ramayan. And another battle was the battle of Kurukshetra. And in these two battles, the hero was a Vaishnava and Vishnu. So, Prabhupada says that devotees are not cowards. Actually, by the power of this movement and the effect of this movement is that it actually revolutionizes entire societies. In the battle of Kurukshetra, the hero was Arjuna, a Vaishnava. In the battle of the Ram and Ravan, the hero is Lord Ram. So the Lord and his devotees are very powerful. So there's 5 topics of the Bhagavad Gita. First one is who am I? The Atma. The second one is Prakriti, the material world. Third one is Karma. The fourth one is Kala. And the fifth one is Ishvar. And all of these are answering a fundamental question that we have. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing here? Karma. How long am I here? And what is beyond this world? What is the goal of this world, the purpose of this world? And that is the Lord Ishvara. And all of these chapters in the Gita and the Gita as a whole cover these various 5 topics. In chapter 1, it seems like topic number 2 is quite prominent. It's describing what is the nature of this world. And chapter 2 obviously starts with the Atma, or the soul. So people may ask, by mentioning these great fighters, what spiritual progress do we make? We are meant for chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So by chanting the names of these great fighters, what do we gain? This is a very nice question, right? Even in the Bhagavatam, we find many times lists of names. And chapter 1 is starting with lists of names. Why doesn't chapter 1 just start with the idea of the soul, the Atma? Why doesn't it just start with glorifying Krishna? What is the purpose of listing these names and, starting with something apparently quite material? But the thing is that Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe, whenever there's connection with Krishna, that also becomes Krishna. Whenever there's connection with Krishna, that also becomes Krishna. So in the introduction, we learned these 5 topics are there. We know that the goal is Krishna. So why it's important to have chapter 1? Wasn't it just omitted from the Gita? Many times when we distribute books, we tell the people, start with chapter 2. Because we know chapter 1, they'll read all the names and they'll be like, what is this book? Especially to Western audiences. But no, Prabhupada is saying that is also Krishna because of its connection with Krishna. And this is why we cannot remove chapter 1, because all of it is part of Krishna. So Vaishnavas do not simply chant Hare Krishna. If there's a need, they can fight under the guidance of Vishnu and become victorious. Out of the 26 qualifications, 1 qualification is Daksha, expert. If there's a need for fighting, they can fight very expertly. That is also needed. Krishna consciousness does not mean one-sided. Krishna is all-pervading. The Krishna conscious movement also should be all-pervading. It should touch everything, even politics, sociology, everything, if required. So clearly, chanting Hare Krishna is our most vital, important business. But Prabhupada here is saying that it's not just chanting Hare Krishna. For a Vaishnava, we do not simply chant Hare Krishna. If needed, we can serve the Lord. And if that service requires fighting, then the devotee fights for the Lord. If the service requires doing politics, sociology, economics, business, we can do those things for Krishna. So this is why preaching, spreading, sharing Krishna consciousness is so important and one of our key principles. And this is what Arjuna is doing. He's doing it as a fighter, right? He's destroying evil. We don't have that role or that adhikar. We do it by teaching, right? Prabhupada said his temples are educational institutions by educating others. But the principle is the same. We're trying to follow in the footsteps of Arjuna. We're trying to do Krishna's work, Krishna's desire to spread this Krishna consciousness movement. And Krishna at the end assures us, tasmat manusheshu, that such a person is the most dear. So we keep that as our service to the Lord. So these are the names of the fighters, and we see the context. Why does the Gita mention the names of these fighters? And here we have, now in text 15, the names of the Lord. In the purport to text 15, these are all the different names that are mentioned. And these are the names that are mentioned in different places in the Gita that Prabhupada brings together in this purport, because these names of the Lord describe his different relationships and roles that the Lord plays, particularly in relation to the devotees, but also in relation to just in terms of his functions. So Arjuna refers to Krishna as Govinda. We will see, right? So he says Govinda because Krishna gives pleasure to the cows and the senses. And when Arjuna has his doubts, then he says, Krishna, why are you agitating my senses like this? You are the giver of pleasure to the senses. Please pacify my senses by, helping me, by responding to my questions. He's known as Vasudev because he's the son of Vasudev. There's a typo here, not the son of Vasudev, but the son of Vasudev. Devaki Nandana because he accepted Devaki as his mother. Yashoda Nandana because he was also the sweetheart, the child of Yashoda. Partha Sarathi because he is the Sarathi, the charioteer of Arjuna. And Hrishikesha because he gave direction to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So Hrishikesha also means the Lord of the senses, Isha of the Rishi, right? So the Lord of the senses. So he gave direction to Arjuna and made his senses very sharp. Therefore, Arjuna could do mystical things, amazing things. And therefore, Krishna is Hrishikesha for all of us. The devotees of the Lord can do amazing, wonderful things because Krishna is directly guiding their senses. Just like when we meet some very powerful Vaishnavas, you'll notice that they say what's exactly on your mind, or exactly what you need to hear, or they say something that is too amazing, for someone to have known or to have said, given ordinary material, cognition. How is that possible? Because Hrishikesha is guiding their senses. Krishna is guiding their senses. Lord Krishna is referred to as Hrishikesha in this verse because he is the owner of all senses. The living entities are part and parcel of him, and therefore the senses of the living entities are also part and parcel of his senses. The impersonalists cannot account for the senses of the living entities, and therefore they are always anxious to describe all living entities as senseless or impersonal. If he's the owner of all senses, then Krishna also must have senses. Makes sense, right? The Lord, situated in the hearts of all living entities, directs their senses, but he directs in terms of the surrender of the living entity. Very key point. He directs in terms of the surrender of the living entity. And in the case of the pure devotee, he directly controls the senses. Here on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, the Lord directly controls the transcendental senses of Arjuna, and thus his particular name of Hrishikesha. So wonderful, isn't it? So wonderful. And another key, observation, just a nice observation, is that Prabhupada says that Arjuna had transcendental senses. Of course, Krishna does, but Arjuna does. Because The senses, when they're engaged in the master of the senses, Hrishikena Hrishikesha, nectar devotion, right? Sevanam Bhaktir Uchyate. When they're engaged in the master of the senses, then they become fully purified. Then they become transcendental. So because Arjuna is engaging his senses in the service of the Lord, his senses have become transcendental. And because they have become transcendental, Krishna can guide and control those senses. So if we're feeling bewildered, we want guidance, all we have to do is surrender to Krishna. He directs in terms of the surrender of the living entity. He's directing everyone's senses, but he directs more the more we're surrendered. And for a pure devotee, he's controlling them. So here are the chapter sections. You're probably wondering, okay, so how does this all fit together? These wonderful points. Now, wanted to highlight some very key points in this chapter, things that you can meditate on. Now, some structure. So, texts 1 through 11 describe the battle and the omens of victory. Right? I gave you the example of text 9. Please read text 1 and the purport in particular also. Because Prabhupada says, Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre, that because this battlefield is Dharma Kshetra, it is the place of Dharma, an omen is that Dharma should prevail. Because Kurukshetra, even to this day, and you can please go and visit it, it is a place of pilgrimage. And somehow they chose a pilgrimage site for the site of the battle. There's so many holy places in Kurukshetra, even in addition to the holy place of where Krishna spoke the Gita to Arjuna. Prior to this, it was, a place of meditation for the sages. So in such an auspicious place, the auspicious will prevail. And then after that, Duryodhana's conversation further clarifies this. Duryodhana's conversation with Dronacharya reveals his anxiety about the outcome of the battle, expertise in political diplomacy, as well as his inflated ego, which I covered, right? Which we talked about. His expertise in political diplomacy. An example of this, he says to all of his warriors, when Bhishma is there, he says, now all of you should give your wholehearted support to Bhishma. So he's putting Bhishma up. He's the commander. He needs his full support. He says, everyone should support Bhishma. He's also teaching a strategy of success where his army is going to be successful if, regardless of where Bhishma's heart and mind is exactly at, if everyone supports Bhishma. He's confirming, no, we all must support Bhishma. Bhishma's our grandsire, he's our leader. And though he himself didn't gel with Bhishma so much, he said, now at this battlefield, we all have to support him. And then text 12 to 26, the war begins. Conch shells are blown by both armies, 12 to 19. Arjuna's chariot is drawn between the two armies. He sees his relatives and becomes confused. So, this is also very wonderful. Panchajanya Hrishikesha, where Krishna blows his wonderful conch shell. Bhima and Arjuna do, and when they blow their conch shell, it shatters the hearts of the Kauravas. The conch shell also becomes a sign of their victory. Arjuna's chariot is drawn between the two armies. He asks Krishna, please take me there, and he sees his relatives on both sides, and he becomes very confused. What should I do? How should I go forward? These are very key points because they are setting, the heartfelt, feelings of Arjuna when he sees all of his relatives. Arjuna has addressed Lord Krishna as Govinda because Krishna is the object of all pleasure for cows and senses. By using this significant word, Arjuna indicates that Krishna should understand what will satisfy Arjuna's senses. But Govinda is not meant for satisfying our senses. If we try to satisfy the senses of Govinda, however, then automatically our own senses are satisfied. So here Prabhupada gives a slightly different twist to that same word Govinda. And he's saying Arjuna is calling Krishna Govinda because he's saying, you give pleasure to the senses. So my Lord, please give pleasure to my senses, not by just pacifying them, as I mentioned, but give pleasure to my senses by doing what I want to do. But Prabhupada is saying, no, Krishna doesn't work like that. Krishna doesn't do what we want. Krishna wants us to satisfy his senses, and by so doing, our senses automatically become satisfied. That's the whole process of bhakti or devotion, where we feel so happy and enlivened in devotional service, not because we're serving ourselves, but because when we serve Krishna, we're serving Krishna's senses, therefore we are feeling satisfied. Materially, everyone wants to satisfy his senses, and he wants God to be the order supplier for such satisfaction. The Lord will satisfy the senses of the living entities as much as they deserve, but not to the extent that they may covet. Prabhupada's words are just so amazing, right? The Lord will satisfy the senses of the living entities as much as they deserve, but not to the extent that they may covet. But when one takes the opposite way, namely, when one tries to satisfy the senses of Govinda without desiring to satisfy one's own senses, then by the grace of Govinda, all desires of the living entity are satisfied. So Krishna does satisfy our senses. All these people in the material world, not all of them are serving Krishna, yet their senses are being satisfied to a certain extent. If he satisfies too much, they'll covet, right? They'll become greedy. They'll want more and more, or they'll become very selfish. So he satisfies to others to a certain extent, but for his devotees who try to satisfy his senses, all the desires of that living entity are satisfied. A devotee is perfectly satisfied. So Arjuna's arguments against now we come to, so we did the first two sections back here, text 1 through 11 and 12 to 26, and now we're in this section of 27 to 46, which is the very you could say now the descriptions are over, the scene has been set. Now Arjuna is expressing, after looking over the army arrayed there and seeing all of his relatives present there, all of his friends and so many innocent soldiers, Arjuna now starts to shiver. He starts to become very disheartened, very distraught. He begins to lament, and he presents his 4 arguments against fighting. So one by one, these are the 4 arguments. His first argument, which we started with, is compassion. Arjuna, as a soft-hearted, gentle devotee, does not want to kill. This compassion is good, but is not properly guided by intelligence. So his first argument is, Krishna, why should we kill people? If only our leaders today would think that way, right? Text 30 to 35. The second argument is of enjoyment. So forgetting compassion, he says, even if we think about our own enjoyment, that we need to fight this battle to, be happy, there's no one wins in a battle. All possible outcomes in the battle bring only suffering. Arjuna feels the war is not worth it for his personal satisfaction. In material consciousness, both victory and defeat bring suffering. Very amazing point, right? In material consciousness, we think if we win, we'll be happy. But both victory and defeat bring suffering. Either way, it's so true, right? We can just reflect on our life, give so many examples. When someone's successful, when someone loses, obviously, but when they're successful, they're just as miserable. You're competing with your colleagues and you get that position that they don't get, and you're in that position and you win, right? Your boss chooses you over the others, and we're all, striving for, promotion, distinction, some honor. But then when you get that job, then you have to work twice as hard. You're working now round the clock to maintain that position, to maintain that status. And I see this at my work, the chairs, the deans, they work so hard. And because of winter storms and ice days, they had canceled classes, they had closed the campus. So the students and we faculty, we were, off campus, sent them some assignments and didn't go there, didn't have to teach. And it was unsafe to drive. The roads were very unsafe, very icy. But the president of our university, she very proudly told us that I still came to work on those days. And everyone was like, oh, wow, look at this. And, she is the president. She has such a great distinction. But because of that, she has to go to work, even on the days when it's icy and it's unsafe to drive. We were at home having a good time. She was at work. She had to work. So, she's in the most, you could say, materially affluent position, but that's also bringing suffering. So he says, if we win this battle, if we lose the battle, we will suffer. And if we win the battle, then who will we enjoy this kingdom with? If we lose the battle, obviously, we'll be dead, so much suffering. If we win the battle, then everyone who we want to enjoy it with will also die. So what is the use of fighting this battle? And this is actually one of the messages of the Mahabharata that people don't know. People say that Gandhi learned non-violence by reading the Gita and the Mahabharata. Gandhi has a quote where he says that I learned non-violence by reading the Mahabharata. And you wonder, this is a story of war, and Krishna's telling Arjuna to fight. How did he learn non-violence? Well, one of the messages of the Mahabharata, if you read the final chapters, is that no one wins in a war. Because the Pandavas, they lose all their children. Every single one of them. Abhimanyu and all 5 sons. The Mahabharata, from a clearly, academic point of view, that, assuming it's not revealed, it's the story that's been made, right? It could have said, the Pandavas were victorious and with their kids, they won the battle. But it particularly says, from whatever perspective you see the Mahabharata, it says that the Pandavas lost all their children. And what is the state of Yudhishthira? He's a basket case, right? Yudhishthira is weeping and lamenting. He's the king now, and he's going to Bhishma for solace. So a clear message of the Mahabharata, one of the final conclusions or messages of the text, is that no one wins as a result of the war. And this is why there was no reason for Arjuna to fight other than to satisfy or please Krishna. Because if a person is actually fighting for themselves, the result of that fight will be defeat. Even if they win that fight, they will still lose. Because in a war, no one wins. We can see the Russia-Ukraine war, right? Both sides, now 500,000 people have died from both sides. Both sides lost almost the same number of warriors, and they're crying, and Ukraine wins, but still so much of their land is destroyed, the people. And so therefore Krishna, he tries to avoid the battle at all costs, because if it can be avoided and the solution can still be attained, then people will actually win. But once it comes to that point, both sides are losing. So this is his second argument. His third argument is of sinful reaction. Arjuna argues that it is sinful to kill his superiors and relatives, which is very true, right? These are, he says, objects of my worship. The actual verse, he says, even if they are sinful and they're acting badly, they're still objects of my worship. A very wonderful message here, that this was spiritual, spiritual character or Vaishnav behavior, that though the the superior or the elder may be sinful, yet they're still an object of worship. Of course, Arjuna is still following the guidance of Krishna, but his mood or approach is that they are my superiors, so I should not retaliate. I should not do the same that they are doing, because it will be more sinful on my end than it will be on their end. Text 37 to 43, destruction of the family. Arjuna says that fighting in this war will ruin society by destroying their families and their religious and moral traditions. So Arjuna, he is a very mature person. He's a Dhira, right? And as a Dhira, he knows for a fact that as a result of the battle, Adharma Abhivavat Krishna, right? Very, very famous verse. Pradushanti kulastriya strishu dishtashu vashniya. Strishu dishtashu vashniya. And then I'm forgetting the last line. But he says that only adharma will result from this, because the stri, the ladies, will be left without their husbands. And when the men are killed, the ladies will not have their husbands, their families, someone to take care of them, protect them. And only irreligion will flourish in society. It will ruin society. All the traditions will be destroyed. People will not have strong families. They will not have any guidance or protection. The elders will be dead. All the men who died in the battlefield, some of them were even elderly probably. It was very very massive battle. They were the Bhishma, for example, is an elder, and they are also going to die. So what moral traditions, what will happen to this society, this civilization, if this battle happens? Krishna, you're telling me to fight for dharma because they are evil, they should not be the king. But even if we win, if all the families are destroyed, how will dharma prevail? We're fighting for dharma, but this is going to destroy dharma. Therefore, we should not fight. So the conclusion is Arjuna decides not to fight and in despair throws aside his bow and arrows. And this was a very strong statement when he threw his bow aside, because he had never put his bow down. Arjuna had actually sworn that if anyone tells me to throw my bow down, I will kill that person. As a warrior, he had made that vow. Only an enemy would tell him that. And then one time there's a sub story. We don't have time for it, so I won't get into it. But one time, I think it was Yudhishthira, he tells him, "Put your bow down," and then Arjuna thinks, "What should I do? I cannot kill him, and I made this vow." So then Krishna helps him out of that situation. Okay, so these are amazing points. Please meditate on them. His doubts, his character, his greatness. So let's see, we're short of time here, so I will have to skip some things. He's illustrating the Vaishnava quality of Paradukha Dukhi. This is his qualification to be Krishna's student. His quality of Paradukha Dukhi. Krishna is very pleased by this quality. He's pleased by his quality of not considering his own happiness, his own prosperity, but thinking only about the suffering of others, considering the prosperity of others before his own. Krishna is pleased by his quality of submission, his quality of his gentleness, his soft-heartedness. And we can contrast this between Duryodhana's mature consciousness, who's just making sure in complete anxiety that his warriors might not have second thoughts by seeing the other side. Because see, we're not used to this form of warfare now. Now warfare is like, hiding behind walls and shooting behind them. This is a very, monumental moment for the soldiers when they actually stand opposite to each other, knowing that at any moment, and being sure, especially if you're in the front line, that you are going to die. And you have the courage to fight the battle. And seeing the other side, and do I have the courage of killing all those people, trying to kill those people? And so, so they're both having thoughts. Arjuna's thought is spiritual, devotional, full of compassion. Duryodhana's thought is material, just somehow have to win, somehow have to be the top dog, right? That's the material consciousness. So I'm going to skip these now because this is going to go into other points. So these are some additional thoughts. Okay, so we will end here at this point and see if there are any questions, comments, and because we're at the end of our hour, it's a perfect time, and we'll have some discussion. Hare Krishna, Ranchor Prabhu, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, please my humble obeisances all goes to Prabhupada. Thank you so much for this class. I know the first chapter seems very like I've heard devotees say like the first chapter is so kind of basic 'cause it's more simple than the second chapter, but I think you explained all the insights very nicely. So I feel like there's so many lessons I learned. I had one question regarding how everybody who's on the battlefield then or everyone who dies in the presence of Krishna then goes back to Godhead. So I don't know like the full story of the Mahabharata, but I know like I don't know if Duryodhana died in Krishna's presence. I'm not sure he did. I think he was killed by Bhima later on. But I don't know if we can like I don't know if it's like if we understand that all of those demons then like went back to Godhead. So can we how do we understand that they were able to get the same result that we get like by trying to chant 16 rounds every day? Like obviously we can't think, oh, let me just be a demon and I'll just be killed by Krishna and then I don't have to chant my rounds. So like how do we understand that?
Very nice question. Very nice point. There's many ways we could approach this. One is that we read about the various demons that Krishna kills. Like one of them is Putana, for example, right? And Putana is also mentioned that when Krishna sucks her breast, he also sucks out the life air. But because she approaches Krishna as a mother, Krishna accepts her as a mother and immediately gives her liberation. And not only does he give her liberation, but he gives her the position of his mother, like a mother, a nurse in the spiritual world. And that's her like eternal swarupa in the spiritual world. And thinking about how kind Krishna is, Uddhava says that famous verse in the Bhagavatam, Aho Bakiyam Stalakala Bhutam, right? That where can you find a compassionate master like Krishna? So he is just marveling on how Krishna is so compassionate that she's completely unqualified and she comes to kill the Lord, yet Krishna makes her his mother. Now, when we look at the story of Putana in detail, we get to know that in her previous life, she was Bali Maharaj's, I believe, sister or wife, one of the two. I'm forgetting. But he was, I think, the sister of Bali Maharaj. Someone was unmuted, they know. And so, yeah.
I think she was the daughter or
Either daughter or sister. Sometimes it says
Sister.
daughter, but now it's
Okay.
wife. Yes.
I see. Daughter or sister. Okay, well, one of those two. Srinivas Prabhu, or were you also going to say something?
I was saying that I think she was a sister of Bali
Sister.
Maharaj.
Okay. Yes. So she was actually a great devotee of the Lord, and she loved the Lord. But when Vamandev came and took everything away from Bali Maharaj, he just stole it away from him. He was a great king, very pious, was a devotee of the Lord, but he left him with nothing and then pushed him down to the hellish planet. Like basically just, just flattened the whole thing. Then she felt some anger towards him. She felt some intense anger, like, this Brahmin boy, such a sweet boy. And immediately she wanted to like love him because he was the sweetest child around, like love him and kiss him and cuddle him. But at the same time, she was feeling angry at him, like mothers do, you know, their sweetest child, but that child goes and spills ketchup on the carpet. So so then in her next life, she has to come as Putana because she has to work out that anger. It was wrong, you know. How can you get angry at the Lord? She has to work out that anger towards Krishna. And after that, goes back home, back to Godhead. So, long story short, the people on the other side, they may be demons, they may be, you know, who they are, we don't know. But the reason they're there in front of Lord Krishna is because could be causeless mercy, just their good fortune, but it could also be because in their previous life, they did something that brought them there. They were, you know, like Putana in her previous life, they were actually devotees, but they had some anger towards the Lord, or they had some anartha still left, and Krishna is destroying that. And they're having to die in this battle, but simultaneously liberating them. So that's one way to understand this, and why under the normal circumstance, you know, we can't follow that same example. You know, we have to do the practice of bhakti yoga so we can even come to the stage of being someone like Bali Maharaj's sister. And secondly, another point that I wanted to make was Prabhupada says that some people win the lottery. You know, they win the jackpot. But just because some people do doesn't mean that all of us give up our job and we stay home and we say, you know, we're waiting for the lottery to come and I won't work because that person didn't have to work. In the same way, some people may get Lord Chaitanya's mercy in particular. They may become, you know, Krishna conscious overnight because of Krishna's mercy. But we can't depend on that. We have to make our effort and advance in Krishna consciousness. Does that answer your question, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you. So it's a combination of some was Krishna's causeless mercy, and some may have been like past lives, but we should be sadhanas in that regard.
Yes, and actually, this is supported by Shastra because the Nectar Devotion says that there's two causes of bhakti in a person's life, and one is the devotees and the Lord's causeless mercy. A person may begin the process of devotional service, may flourish in that process of devotional service by the mercy and causes and mercy of Krishna and his devotees. And the second reason, he says, is pious activities done in previous lives, devotional service done in previous lives. So, yeah, it's one or the other.
All right, thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Wonderful. Yeah, Yashoda Vatsala Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for the wonderful session, and
Yeah.
thanks for reminding
Mm.
all those topics that keep again and again coming to my mind. I have three small quick questions. The very first thing is in that slide, if we can go to that slide, Prabhuji. So it says enjoyment for the same second part, like so.
Mm.
We are still trying to highlight, the while he's talking about suffering, uh, you know, all thing that is written about is suffering, but the heading there argument is enjoyment. So he is that like being fearful of suffering, or is it like he wants to enjoy but he don't want to have any suffering?
Yeah,
That
a good
was
point. The title of that argument could be misleading. The title is enjoyment. His argument regarding enjoyment. But his argument is, like you're saying, that's the subtext here, that he's thinking about the battle and he's saying that every possible outcome of this battle will only bring me suffering. If I lose the battle, obviously it's going to be suffering. But if I win the battle, it's going to be suffering because he says, who will I enjoy it with, right? He says, everyone is dead. I can't enjoy it with anyone, or the guilt of it will kill me, or, there's just no pleasure. Everything that we enjoy will be tainted with blood. So, yes, his argument is of suffering, that it's just every option will bring suffering. So, therefore, it will not bring any enjoyment. there's no enjoyment.
Yeah, yeah. And from the overall result perspective, I mean to say, definitely everyone, I've heard in another session as well, like Krishna wanted to bring everyone, otherwise he could have done for those with just Kauravas or with few people, but he wanted all the demonic mentality people to come together and then get done everything at one time, clear everything at one time. So from the material perspective, did these worries or these worries of Arjuna come true or not? Because anyway, so many people got killed. So women's were that thing, the same thing happened to women, and all those things have happened, right?
Yes.
Though men were not there and all. So how we can still see that situation as a very plus plus.
Okay, sorry, something here happened. Okay, sorry about this. So your question is, how can we see what thing is a plus?
As a still as a, I mean to say, yeah. So dharma, because of Krishna was on the side of dharma, or rather Krishna is dharma himself. So Arjuna won, but still so many people died, and did that not cause the
So your question is, wasn't Arjuna right? Like at the end,
yeah
everyone
yeah
died. So wasn't he? You're absolutely right. I mean, if we look at it from one perspective, he was right. And that's why the message of the Mahabharata is, Mahabharata knows that kings will read the Mahabharata, leaders will read the Mahabharata. The message is don't fight, because in a fight, a battle, both sides perish. Not just one side, both sides get such a sinful reaction and all these things. But the one exception is that the devotee has to fight upon the order of the Lord. And if we follow the order of the Lord, then the result is auspicious. Now we have to be sure that we have the order of the Lord. And this is why, to check and double check, Arjun asks Krishna, and then he says, show me your universal form, so I know that the person I'm asking is actually God. And then we see that the result is auspicious, because Parikshit Maharaj, he survives, and Parikshit Maharaj is the ideal king. The Bhagavatam is spoken, and it's described that the kingdom was prosperous under Maharaj Yudhishthira and Parikshit Maharaj. So the Lord can fulfill all the shortcomings. We cannot. And so, yes, in the absence of the Lord's instructions, Arjuna was completely right. And that battle was in many ways a complete failure, because after that battle happened, only the Pandavas and 3 more people survived. Imagine. So what's the use? Everyone had perished.
Haribol. Yeah, Prabhuji, thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, can I add something to the question when Prabhuji was asking about the second argument? Arjuna is trying to say that it will be a suffering and not, the enjoyment will be a suffering,
Yes.
So a small example we can see is that, for example, someone bought a new house and has decorated it very nicely, put in a lot of efforts and taken care of each and every detail and made the house really beautiful. But there is no one coming to see that beautiful house. So it's happiness and stress at the same time, because we made the house with so much efforts, but there is no one to visit and see the house. So
That's such a good example.
Yeah.
That's such a good example, because for some time I lived in Florida, and you would see these amazing mansions right next to the beach. And when people walk on the beach, then you notice this. And one thing that we consistently noticed is that all of these amazing mansions were always completely empty. And if someone was there, it was like one old man And maybe if you're really lucky, there's an old woman there also. But like, and no one wanted to be there. No one was there with them. They're just, and you'll see in general, even here in Chicago and other places, if there's a beautiful big house, it'll almost always be empty. And if there's a small apartment or small house, it will be, be filled with people, and there's some life there, something going on. So that's, very much the nature of this world. You get something material like a kingdom, Arjuna is saying, but then there's no one there to enjoy it with. So, yes. Okay, Rasa Keli Mataji.
Yes, so Hare Krishna Prabhu,
Hare Krishna.
I just had a point. So like we can see that like Duryodhan, because of his material consciousness, he had a consciousness that he wanted to win. But on the other side, Arjun had a spiritual consciousness and he had compassion of his family instead of the thought to win like Duryodhan.
Mm. Such a nice comment. Such a nice observation. I think you got the essence of it. Yes, thank you. Our desire should not be to Ishwaram Aham Bhogi. Our desire should not be to be the controllers, rulers, proprietors of things, but our desire should be to serve. Yes, like Arjuna, to serve and be a servant of Krishna. Bhadra Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, please
Hare
accept
Krishna.
the wonderful class. So Prabhu, you mentioned that in the battlefield, there were all sorts of people fighting the battle.
Mm.
There were, good people. There were demonic people also.
Mm.
And then we always hear from all the senior Vaishnavas and Acharyas that, if we chant sincerely, it rids of all our anarthas.
Mm.
And to the extent we surrender, Krishna will reciprocate.
Mm.
But so the question is that, we are not pure at all.
Mm.
We are all trying to become a devotee.
Mm.
This is what this is for me I'm talking about. I cannot say for everybody. But when we are trying to become a devotee, and when we are chanting, we have all sorts of thoughts crossing our mind.
Mm.
Our mind is so fickle that it cannot concentrate even for 1 second.
Mm.
And we get good thoughts and bad thoughts.
Mm.
So how do we because when we get bad thoughts, it can be any kind of thought, about defeating somebody, about destructing somebody's property, or taking away somebody's money.
Yes.
And all
Yeah.
those thoughts come into our mind because of the way we are in this material world, acting in modes of material nature.
Mm.
How do we make sure that those thoughts don't cross our mind and we don't become demonic?
Mm.
But we are not so fortunate that we are in the battle of Kurukshetra, and even if we are demonic, we would get liberation.
Mm. Yes. Yes.
We are not at that.
Yes.
We are not that fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
How do we, make sure that we don't have those demonic thoughts?
Mm. Now, this is such a nice question, a comment question, and this is a question that I ask myself every day when we chant, right? That how can I stop these thoughts coming in my mind while I'm chanting? How can I stop these thoughts coming in my mind when we're attending Mangal Arti or any Arti or any Kirtan? Because just this morning, right? I was thinking, oh no, I'll just focus on the holy name. I'll just think of Krishna. I'll just hear the sound. And I did it for 10 seconds, and exactly, on the 11th second, the mind was somewhere else, right? And it's almost hopeless, we see. So Queen Kunti has a very nice prayer to the Lord. And I forget always how it starts, but it says Gange Vogha Mudanvati.
Tvayamenanya Vishaya Matir Madhupate Sakrit.
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. Yes, so what was the first word again, Prabhu?
Tvayamenanya Vishaya.
Prayi me nanya vishaya, where Queen Kunti is saying that let my mind be free from all these distractions and think of you alone, right? Like the Ganges forever flows to the sea. Let my mind rush to you. And we were attending one class with His Holiness Roba Swami Maharaj, and I asked him that, is this actually the chanter's prayer? And he said, yes, indeed, this is the chanter's prayer. And we should chant this verse before we start our rounds. Because we're praying to Krishna that please, this is what Queen Kunti is praying, that please let my mind not go anywhere else and just be focused at your lotus feet. And that's the chanting, that's what we're trying to do, is always just my mind, can it just focus at your lotus feet? And every time, every 5 minutes we're failing, and every time we're trying to bring it back again, So, so the meaning of this prayer is exactly what you're asking, is, and this is the whole process of Krishna consciousness, that due to our past vasanas, our past anarthas, our mind is going so many places, and the nature of the mind over so many lifetimes, it's become habitual for us, natural for us to have bad thoughts. The nature of the mind is to think of bad things. We go in a situation, it's so nice, everything's so wonderful, but there's one controversial person or thought or situation, and everyone picks up on that, right? And then well, one thing that's wrong in it, that's what everyone discusses after they come back from that party or from that place. They they start to talk, because that's the nature of the mind. That's the demonic nature, which you're saying. And Queen Kunti is saying that no, let my mind focus only on you, Krishna. Pull it away from these things. So that is a process of chanting. That is a process of our sadhana, our service, is replacing material consciousness with spiritual consciousness. Madan Gopal Prabhu, would you have a further comment on this? You want to?
Thank you. You explained it very perfectly. This is of course, it's ideal. Sometimes some of us, we've been chanting for 1 year, 2 years, even 20, 30 years, but we don't feel this forceful, like Ganga flowing into the ocean. We don't feel that. So we have to really, if that really is our main goal in Krishna consciousness, is to make sure all our energy and our life is structured around this one point of chanting properly. If you can view our life that way, then our whole life will also become perfect. Let's make an arrangement that, okay, now I think in this particular way. It says Matir Madhupate Sakrit. You see, Tvaime Ananya Vishaya Matir Madhupate. Mati means what? The whole orientation in life. Where am I facing? Where's my mati? Wherever is my mati is my gati, which that's where I end up. So if I'm facing toward Chicago, that's where I'll end up. So if I'm facing toward pure chanting, then everything else we do will add to that in that direction. And so it's actually very natural for the heart to flow towards the one we love, but we have to remove the blockages of that flow. So anything we can do to improve our chanting, including something simple as sitting properly. Prabhupada interrupted his japa tape twice. Says sit properly. It means it's important. Every little thing we do to improve our japa, focus, just really absorb our mind and pray like this. It changes. It's a game changer. So we just have to prioritize the quality. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. It was a very nice point. Thank you. Yes. Prabhu, does that answer your question?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Well, not really answer. Does that help? Because there's so much to this, right? We can think of so many ways in which we can do things to help in that process. Like Madan Gopal Prabhu was saying, even small things matter so much. And along with that, I was thinking association is so important. When we associate with the devotees, with the Vaishnavas, then the good thoughts, the good approach comes in our mind. Similarly, people who are naturally, people who are more prone to offensive thoughts, associating with them, we also get those thoughts. We also think in that same way.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Krishna Jivani Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, wonderful lecture. Thank you very much. Prabhu, you had mentioned about for every text there's a context. So I have been reading I have read the purport that you highlighted 1.15 many times, but I've never felt the same connection or that, wow, there's so much packed in this 5 sentences. So, so which makes me question that things that I thought I've already read the purport, like how much I really, I think you understand what I'm saying. There's one thing about reading, there's another thing about internalizing. So is that something that, are there best practices to actually gain the most out of a purport and truly understand it? Is that something that comes only with purity, or are there methods that we can do to do that, to do quality rather than quantity?
That's such a nice observation, Mataji, and such a nice point. And I definitely, appreciate what you're saying, because we have this experience so often. Like, you read a purport and you're like, wow, I never thought about this or said this, or never remembered this. And here Prabhupada is saying it, and obviously you read this before and you read through it before. And actually Krishna tells us this in the Gita. He says, Tushyanti cha ramanti cha. Machitta madgata prana bodhyanta parasparam katayanta shimam nityam tushyanti cha ramanti cha. That my devotees of my Lord are always engaged in conversing about me with one another, having conversations. And Srila Prabhupada writes, either in the purports there or somewhere else, he writes that the Lord appears in the midst of the conversations of his devotees. Krishna appears in between that conversation. And that's actually how Krishna is revealed, and that's actually how spiritual knowledge is revealed. That the same thing, we read it, but when we discuss it, and we discuss it with different devotees, it's amazing in that discussion, it's not even just the devotees, but Krishna, by engaging in that practice, Krishna will show himself, And there's a few verses in this chapter that this was happening. Like I was thinking, what an amazing principle, and I completely forgot about this. And it answered a question that I had, or a reflection that I had on a practical thing in devotional life that I was facing, a conflict with someone or a problem or something like this. And the Gita was giving such an amazing answer, Prabhupada's purport in that verse. So, and that happened when talking and discussing, right? So this is why there's just no shortcut to this process of conversation and hearing and chanting. Like, the Upanishads, the traditional method was that the disciple hears from the Guru. Upanishad, particularly hearing the Shunvatam, the hearing is very important. And Prabhupada also says that reading is very important, but the focus is particularly hearing, and that medium of hearing is specific. That it's not, reading is also hearing, but not exactly. Why? Because in the hearing process, then there's this doubt and discussion and, like that. So I think my small thought is that going deeper in the purports is we discuss them and also read them again and again. But discussing them really helps.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji. And I know you're a connoisseur of spiritual knowledge. You're always, studying and restudying, and so eager to understand the Lord. So thank you. Srinivas Pundarika Prabhu, you had your hand up and then you put it down.
Oh, Hare Krishna Prabhu, general pranams. I just want to add one point. In a couple of years back, a senior devotee, came to Pittsburgh. At the time, I asked the same question what Ranchar Prabhu was asking. Why all these demons and people who died in Kurukshetra, they went to back to Godhead or heavenly planets. And he gave another answer. I just want to share that. He said, Krishna always comes with a, it's like a drama troupe. They come here and they do the play and then they go back. And he was also mentioning that somewhere in the spiritual world, material world, the same thing will be happening. The Ramayana and Mahabharata will be enacted again and again. And this is like a drama troupe. That's what he was explaining. Just want to add.
Very nice point. Yes. Oh, not only does Krishna does this in this world, but he does it over and over again in different worlds, in different material worlds, and different spiritual worlds. He's, of course, in the spiritual world, we say that he doesn't kill the demons there. So, there, it's only devotees. But the point being, like you're saying, that he does this over and over again because he has a drama troupe. And the Pandavas and Queen Kunti, they're actually part of his eternal, leelas. They actually do this same leela again and again in different places. They, particularly Prabhupada says about the Pandavas, they do this always. So yeah. So thank you for that. Also, a quick thing, in the chat, it was clarified by a few devotees that it was Bali Maharaj's daughter. So on this point, just that reminded me, it was the daughter, not the sister. I always, confuse it. So thank you for that clarification, and thank you everyone for joining and coming. This is perfect time. It's 8:30. This is the time we end. So someone shared here in the chat group, 3911, Krishna Jivani Mataji. My Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears, by the process of bona fide hearing. And thus their hearts become cleansed. And you take your seat there. You are so merciful to your devotees that you manifest yourself in the particular eternal form of transcendence in which they always think of you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yes. So through the hearing process, through the ears, by the process of bona fide hearing, Krishna becomes manifest. Okay, so perfect timing, 8:30. So I will share again, even though you have it already, but I'll share again the homeworks. And I think text 1, or no, they changed it now. Yeah, there's no memorization for chapter 1. And please make sure to read the chapter, complete the homework, and the next time we'll do chapter 2. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for another wonderful class.
Thank you,
Prabhu.
Prabhu. Thank you
Prabhu.
so much.
Thank you, Dhanvatana. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu. Thank you so much. Vanshikopa. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Brandy. Hare Krishna.